Hi everybody, I'm Bob Allen. I'd like to spend the next 10 or 12 minutes speaking with you about Gilead's new drug to fight hepatitis C. It's called Sovaldi. It's proven to be a very effective drug, very few side effects, but these improvements come with a cost. It's a very expensive drug, and that's led to a lot of controversy. In the middle of this controversy are the payers, the government, and the patients themselves. So I'd like to take a look at a few of the pricing models that we use to get to where Sovaldi is priced now, and I'd like to present a new pricing model that might help us understand a better way to price drugs in the future and where things are going. So let's take a quick look at hepatitis C itself to get an idea of the problem. Hepatitis C is a liver disease that results from a blood-borne virus. It's transmitted the way most blood-borne diseases are, through blood transfusions, through dirty needles, through childbirth, through intercourse. Now, the thing is that before 1992, we didn't have any tests for hepatitis C. So, we tested for it. There are different ways that the disease is transmitted now. It leads to the strange demographic that many patients with the disease are actually between 50 and 65 years old, the people that were at risk for receiving tainted blood before 92. Scientists have found that hepatitis C can reduce people's lives by an average of 14 and a half years if it's not treated. In the past 3 years, however, there have been a lot of innovative and dynamic new drugs that have come along to help fight the disease. There have been 4 major approvals. These drugs have been their game changers. They go after breaking the RNA chain and disallowing the hepatitis virus from replicating itself inside the body. So, what's the scope of the disease? In the United States, 3.2 million people are believed to be afflicted with hepatitis C. Worldwide, it's somewhere around 170 million people. If we take a look at every 100 people that have hepatitis C, we know that 75 to 85% of them will develop chronic hep C. Somewhere around 60 to 70% of the people will go on to have chronic liver disease. 5 to 20% of the people will develop cirrhosis of the liver, and somewhere around 1 to 5% of the people will actually die from liver disease or cirrhosis or liver cancer. That's 10,000 people per year in the United States, around 350 to 500,000 people worldwide. Where is it distributed? On this map, the lighter colors are where it is less severe, the darker colors are where it's more concentrated. You can see the United States, North America, 1 to 2% of the population is believed to have it. Saharan Africa, Equatorial Africa, it's much higher than that, greater than 3% of the population. Egypt holds the distinction of being the country with the greatest proportion of its citizens to have hepatitis C. That infection rate is believed to be somewhere around 14.5% of the population. It's a very severe disease there. Here's the catch. In most of the world, genotype 1 of the disease is the most prominent. In Egypt, it's genotype 4, a completely different genotype. Many of the early drugs did not treat that. So, how did we get where we are? How did Gilead get here? In 2011, Gilead entered the fight against hepatitis C by purchasing a company called Pharmasset. Pharmasset had a molecule that was in late clinical trials development. It was a phase 3 trials, and it was the molecule that became sofosbuvir. Sofosbuvir later on became Sovaldi. The deal went through for about $11.4 billion in cash and stock. That's an important number. I'd ask you to remember that. We're going to come back to it a little bit later. During that time, the FDA approved Johnson & Johnson's drug Cimeprevir, which became Olysio. It's a protease inhibitor, and the catch with the drug, though, is that it's intended for what they call triple therapy. Triple therapy is when you use the drug plus PEG interferon plus ribavirin. Right? Those 3 together make up triple therapy. It achieved 80% SVR. SVR is the term for success when we're talking about hepatitis C. It stands for the sustained viral response. Right? You need to have a sustained viral response. 0 amount of virus RNA in your bloodstream is considered SVR. So 80% of the patients had SVR when being treated with the drug. Very successful. But not as successful as sofosbuvir. In 2013, the FDA approved it. Right? It's marketed as Sovaldi. It's a polymerase inhibitor. Slightly different mechanism of action. It still breaks the RNA chain, but at a different spot. That allows it to have fewer side effects. It allows it to be used against more genotypes. The other drugs could only be used against genotype 1. Sofosbuvir could be used against genotypes 1 and genotype 4, both of those. So it makes it more effective. Also, it only has minor adverse reactions with HIV medications. Some patients had to decide before, especially with interferon, they could not take interferon along with HIV. So this was a very effective drug, had an 85% SVR alone. If you add the triple therapy, about a 94% rate of SVR. Extremely effective. All right, the stock market, agreed. You can see that from August of 2013 to August of 2014, the stock went up from about $57 a share up to about $97 a share. Tremendously effective. One little hiccup, in the first quarter of 2013, there was a drop of about 15 points, close to 25% of the total value of Gilead stock. Why? People started realizing what the price was. Right? This is about 2 months after the drug was approved. Of course, the treatment is about done. Now the bills come due. They realized how much it cost. There were protests about it. Congress got involved. Representative Henry Waxman actually sent a letter to the CEO of Gilead asking why the drug was priced so expensively, what their plans were, and asking him to explain about that. We'll take a little more later. But first, here, take a look at drug launches. These are the top 10 drug launches in history. The drugs that made the most money their first year on the market. You can see Incivek is number 1. Interesting enough, that's another hepatitis C drug. Celebrex in 1999, it was launched. Both of those have about $1.58 to $1.55 billion in sales. Right? Very successful first year. How does Sovaldi rank with those? Boom, look at that. Close to $6 billion its first year. $5.8 billion in its first year of sales. Like the man says, but wait, there's more. That's not a full year. Sovaldi's only been on the market for 6 months. Its first 6 months, it has made close to $6 billion. It tripled the sales of the most effective drugs in history in just 6 months. Remember that $11.4 billion I asked you to remember? About a year's worth of sales. They'll make back the investment in Pharmasset in 3 years. 3 years from the purchase date, they'll be back on track and have fully regained their investment. That's a remarkable achievement. So why is Sovaldi so expensive? Let's take a look at 2 models of pricing. First is value-based pricing. Right? Value-based pricing looks at the value that patients get versus the price of the drug. So the value that's provided versus its price. But there's 2 different values that are going on here. One is the value to the customer. The customer in this case, though, is the insurance companies, the people that are paying for the drug. Right? What value are they getting at it? Are they seeing the results that would allow them to keep paying for it? The patients, the value for them is, am I getting cured? Right? The cost of the drug. These need to be balanced out. If there's an imbalance there, that's what causes a lot of the difficulty and a lot of the concerns and a lot of the stress that goes on in the marketplace. Also, premium pricing. Premium pricing is what you get when you have the best drug, everybody wants it, they're willing to pay a lot for it, you can charge pretty much whatever you want. You can skim profits off the top, and that's what premium pricing gives you. You have the best that's out there, everybody knows it's the best that's out there, and you can charge more for it. When that happens, you're kind of in the case where Sovaldi is. You can print your own money. So, that said, let's take a look. The model for Sovaldi captures the cost to the patients and to society. Way before any of these new revolutionary drugs came into the marketplace, the Henry Ford Hospital Center and Genentech teamed up on a study of the cost for hepatitis C. You can see here that asymptomatic patients, about $17,000 a year. Hepatitis C, once they start getting cirrhosis, costs about $22,000 a year. And for those patients that go on to develop liver disease, about $60,000 a year. If you get far enough that you actually need a liver transplant, right, to that point where there's a liver transplant, $575,000, and that's minimal. I've seen estimates where it's as high as $750,000, even up to $100,000 for that liver transplant. So those are the costs, the direct costs that are involved with that. Here's where the value conflict comes into play. You have to measure out the $22,000, $23,000 that it costs for treatment every year versus the $84,000 that it costs for the drug. So the $23,000, figure that for 4 years, it'll bring you up to about one course of treatment of the drug. So if you can treat somebody for less than 4 years, you've actually made money rather than curing them today, right? You can cure in 4 months or treat for 4 years. It's the same price. Remember what I said about all the drugs that came in the market in the last 3 years? That's what the drug companies are holding out for. Maybe something better is going to come along. If something better comes along, we'll be better just treating the patients rather than curing them now. Looking at some more numbers for that, remember the little red men at the beginning? Right, 1 to 5% of the patients are going to need a liver transplant. That means that if 1% need that that's $5,750 per patient, or maybe as high as $28,000 per patient. Either way, if you're spending more than that on drugs, you're not being cost efficient. Right? The cost of this transplant is only $57.50 among all your patients. So if you're spending more than that on drugs, you're not being cost efficient. That's what the providers are seeing. That's what the insurance companies are seeing. That's their rationale. That's their calculus that they're making. What's the next best alternative to Sovaldi? What happens when we look at the other drugs? You can see here, if it's just peg interferon and ribavirin, about $20,000 for a course of treatment. It's only 52% effective though, so it costs $38,000 for every cure. And it's actually a little bit more than that because only 50% of the patients actually go through a full course of treatment, but that would bring it up to about $50,000. With Victrellis, Merck's entrance in the market, about $78,000. PR and Sovaldi, $115,000. What's that extra money? That is for the ribavirin and the peg interferon that goes along with it. Sovaldi and Alisio, $148,000. If you take Alisio with it, all right. So those are those models. But let's talk about differential pricing. It's a new way of thinking about it. It's a new way of thinking about how to treat these patients. It brings into the fact that different areas of the world can afford different things. It's a little difficult sometimes to accept. It's a little difficult for us to realize that this will help maximize profits. Let's take a look at it. You can charge different amounts based on the wealth of the region, and you know that not everywhere can afford the same thing, but it allows for all parts of the world to receive the benefits of drug innovation. It reflects the willingness and the ability of the customers to pay. Sounds a little bit like to each according to his needs, from each according to his means. So it's a little bit hard for us to realize that that's going to help maximize profits. It allows for drug companies to still reap the benefits of the risk that they took and their own innovation, but fewer consumers or fewer patients are priced out of the market. And you can really maximize the social benefit because of that. Sovaldi is already priced differently in different countries. Figure in the United States, $84,000. Part of that is because we value innovation, we value new things, we want to be the first and the best. We're willing to pay that price. In Germany, they're not willing to pay so much. The government sets the prices. There it's about $67,000. England brings it down to, they're at $57,000 through their National Institute of Care and Efficiency. Right? They're checking that. They use outcomes. Looks very similar to what we saw in our other chart. India, Egypt, they can't afford so much. They're actually receiving Sovaldi for $900 for a course of treatment. India denied patents for Sovaldi because they didn't think it had a novelty of action. As a result of that, Gilead licensed to local companies and local pharmaceuticals in order to produce it and get some of that. So they're getting back some of that $900, even though they're selling it for only 1% of the price in the United States. It's a different way of thinking about maximizing profit. It's a different way of thinking about how to maximize revenues. But it's the way that works and still provides the drug to a lot of people. I'm sure Gilead didn't think consciously about this, but it landed up being the way they were doing business. It's the way that business can get done. So there's still some pricing challenges, right? They have to recoup the cost of the farm set purchase. They have to do it quickly because the leadership in direct action antivirals does not last long. Right? There's premium pricing pressures all across the world, and you have to take advantage of excuse me, of a lead whenever you have it. So drugs that have already gone by the wayside, Insevic, that fastest drug launch ever, it's already gone. Gilead's knocked it out of the market. Boehringer Ingelheim, they have decided they can't afford to be in the market. They can't produce something as efficient as Sovaldi. The next steps, Merck's getting back in the market. They're fighting again. Bristol Myers Squibb has a hepatitis C drug approved in Japan. And Gilead itself is getting a combination drug which will eliminate interferon completely, and ribavirin as well. And AbbVie expects to have its own hepatitis C drug approved by the end of the year. So, in summary, pricing's still a hurdle. There's new therapies out there, but they're going to cost a lot. How are we going to make up that cost? Sovaldi is fighting it. It's the target of a lot of the animus that's going on, but it's probably misplaced because they're providing value. The value has to be shared by the providers, by the pharmaceutical companies, by the payers, and they all have to get together to make up that, to figure out what that value is. Differential pricing may allow us to do that. That model will help provide the maximum benefit to everyone. And finally, competition might lower the price, but we see it drives other companies out of the market, so some of the players might be there. So that was a quick and dirty look at the pricing models that are used, about how we can think about differential pricing in order to bring a better idea of pharmaceutical pricing to the marketplace, and why Sovaldi might be priced like it is. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be interested in hearing them.